A warm welcome to all of our friends out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. And I'm right here with the Sarah Best. And Sarah, you've lined up an amazing guest for us today. Tell us a little bit more about this person.
Yes, JB. Today with us, we have Dr. Martin Dubin, who goes by Marty. He authored a great work called Blindspotting. Blindspotting, how to see what's holding you back as a leader. He's a clinical psychologist and what he would describe as a serial entrepreneur. He's had, run several businesses, but he's business coach now and does a lot of speaking. And his work and his very astute observations about our inability to have self-awareness really translate into some very practical ways that all of us who are responsible for others can shift and show up a little bit differently as better leaders. So I am super excited to dig in here, John.
Me too. I think it's going to be awesome. So let's go. How does that sound?
Let's go.
The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
It is so great to have you here with us today, Dr. Marty Dubin. Welcome to the podcast.
Great. I'm excited to be here, excited for the conversation.
I just want to share with our listeners that when I understood the work in your book, Blindspotting, the full title is How to See What's Holding You Back as a Leader, I felt like you gave some language to something, well, several things probably that we've been saying for a long time. So I am super excited to dig in. Blindspotting, you've defined it as sort of like a through line. Before we dig into that, I want to tell you that one way the book was described, it's one of those books that quietly hands you a mirror and then tilts it just enough so you finally see what's been standing behind you the whole time or what's been standing in your way. And it's really great that you've done this amazing work. Tell us about the origin of your understanding of these blind spots, these leadership challenges, and let's go from there.
Sure. Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. I love that.
Good one.
I kind of think I hope that it's a mirror and a compass.
Okay.
I've had an unusual career as a clinical psychologist, started out seeing patients in private practice, and then I started companies and ran companies and then got into this leadership. And as you said, self-awareness really is the through line of all of that. And where it really hit me was in a thing I'm sure you all do and most coaches is when you're working with a leader, you interview everybody around them to kind of get a sense of where their strengths are and where there are opportunities to be better. And when I did that, I would sit down with the leader and they would say, well, I know what all my strengths are. We don't need to look at that. Let's just look at where people think I need some improvement. And I would first ask them, well, how self-aware do you think you are? And all of them said, well, maybe there's a few things you're going to tell me. And I felt like if I couldn't bring something to them that they weren't aware of, then I really wasn't doing my job. And it didn't take long to really figure out how to find those things. And that's what I really found was the opportunity for leaders to be able to take a step up is when I could help them see things that they couldn't see about themselves or often see the things that they knew about themselves in a different way.
We could say that the biggest challenge or one of the biggest challenges is therefore invisible. So your work identified what was unseen and empowered this self-awareness piece.
Yeah, we're all, if you think about it, we're all pattern recognizing and pattern seeking beings.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much stimuli out in the world. And, what do you pay attention to? And so you're always filtering things in and filtering things out. And you filter in the things. And after a while, if you're, successful or moderately successful in your life, those become patterns that you use all the time because they work. But guess what? Not every situation is exactly the same. Yeah.
Right.
So you're sometimes in situations where you're doing your normal stuff and it isn't working. And often you don't think it's you. You think, oh, it's the other person or it's a situation that's, wonky in some way. When in fact, where you need to look is at yourself. And how to behave differently than your typical routine way.
Yeah. I have a question. How can you or how do you help leaders appreciate that their inability to see the real pattern isn't like a deficit or a total and utter weakness or failure?
Yeah, that's really an important point, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people
Yeah.
either don't take help or don't seek help because somehow they get into this kind of sense that that's a weakness. And it's kind of what I said earlier. It's just, they're just errors in our system. I mean, if you think about it like a computer, I mean, they're just bugs or certain things computers don't do well.
Mhm.
And that's true for all of us. So I mean, I start off by saying, I'm going to help you see these blind spots, but guess what? You're going to die with the exact same blind spots. You're just going to get more aware of them so that you can be deliberate and strategic about doing something about it. But it's just kind of how we're all built.
If I may, I think that's a really interesting, if you're going to be deliberate and strategic about it, I think that's a big
Yeah.
if, because the three of us, I'm sure we have lots of stories in working with executives and CEOs and founders who they might acknowledge it, but their willingness, their desire, their capacity to really do something about it or use it. We always say in our work around behavioral and cognitive analysis, people, you're not going to rewire a person's behavioral drives.
Right.
That's inherent. But what does change are circumstances. So how do we help them? How do we equip them to adapt to those? But if they're not willing to do it, right there, it doesn't matter if they can recognize their blind spots, they're stuck. I mean, you've seen that in your career, I'm sure.
Yeah. And it's really well said. And that was the challenge I felt in writing the book and
Mm,
in doing my work. I feel like any coach has to be able to answer two questions, like, why are people the way they are? Why do they
Mhm.
behave the way they do? And there's no right answer to that, but you just have to have some model that you believe in, and there's a lot out there. And then you do have to have the point you're raising. You have to have a model for change. How do people change? If you don't really have a good thought about that and use the science in it about changing people's behavior, then it's going to be hard for you to help somebody kind of get started.
hmm
And the realization I had is this is not about transformation. I hate that word. You know,
Mm.
just to your point, I've never transformed anybody, nor should I, nor could I, nor would I, would you want to be. I mean, we are who we are, as you said. So I've found that you can make small changes and they can have a huge impact. And
hmm
it's most of my work has been with senior leaders, and I really equate it to athletes. If you think about elite athletes get more coach, the higher you go as an athlete, the more coaching you get. And what
Mhm.
are they coaching on? They're coaching on very small things
hmm
for you to make a change that can have a major impact.
I like that in the book where you highlight that growth comes from these small but, somewhat precise adjustments
Right.
in behavior and an approach to things. It's just stated as this is not a reinvent yourself book. This is a book about practical, very manageable kind of changes. And I guess in that same vein, the things that we probably need to shift or adjust could be considered strengths. Is that right? That our strengths sometimes become the liability.
Yeah, that was the big unlock for me
Okay.
as a leader. And when I would do those 360s, and the most typical way to do it is you end up with kind of two buckets. Here's your strengths, and then here's your opportunities for improvement. And at first, I did treat those as two separate things, and that's kind of the way I was trained. And then I started to realize there are a lot of things that are in both buckets that are the same things. It's just the
hmm
flip side of the coin,
hmm
you know.
Ah.
Um, and a little fun thing your listeners could do is think about what your strengths are right now. These are adjectives about yourself. Your confidence or your hard work or your creativity or your conscientiousness. Think about what those are and then add the modifier TOO in front of them. What happens
Mm.
when you're too creative, when you're too
Ah.
disciplined, when you're too smart,
Oh,
And
I love
that's
that.
what I started to see is that leaders, it wasn't always worded as the opposite word, but
Right.
when you could see it, the behavior was they were over indexing on their strength in
Mm.
the wrong situation.
That might be some of the best advice I've ever heard. That's just
I
a quick
agree.
reflection. Yeah.
I
Well,
agree. Well,
yeah, go ahead,
can
John.
I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like when somebody gets a promotion, it's like, well,
Yeah,
do more of that thing, do more of what you were doing. And it's like, okay, man, I'm amping it up. That is great advice. Yeah. Sorry,
It
Sarah.
is.
I
well,
agree.
No.
and just to, and what do you do when you're in a new position? You want to prove yourself, so
Yeah.
of course you use your strength even more so.
Yeah.
It's kind of the default too. I think when the
Yes,
pressure is on or the heat gets turned up, we naturally default to those things. So I'm thinking of one particular client who had a strength of being decisive and pretty
exactly.
autonomous, but too decisive means you're shutting other people down or not listening. Some people have very high standards. I hear that a lot. I have high standards. Like, oh, good for you. That's so great. But standards that are too high become complete and total micromanagement, I would think.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then one other one that comes to mind, I could call it a lot of different things, but it really is empathy. It's too being too empathic, too focused on the other person's needs or their being okay, such that you don't have the conversation you need to have. You don't speak the truth. You don't articulate things in a way that it really matters.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, you just kind of made the point, right? Each one of those were not exact opposites of the strength,
Right.
but they are what how the strength shows up when it's overplayed, or when the opposite is needed. I just real for myself, I ran a company, and we were very successful for quite a while, and then we got into a problem with a client. We managed the healthcare for or mental health care for large insurance companies, and we
Mhm.
got into a contract where, um, they had given us bad data to bid on the contract, and so we were losing money, and my natural strength is agreeableness and really helping people, work for collaboration, and I started to approach the problem that way,
Yeah.
and guess what? It was a contract, "Come see us in a year, and we'll talk about a new rate,"
Mm.
and my partner said, "We've got to sue them," and, the lesson learned for me is, there are times to be peacetime CEO and times to be a wartime CEO, and my agreeableness was really the exact opposite of what I needed to be doing at the time.
Oh, that's a really pertinent and powerful example. So you also highlight in all of your work, you've kind of created this concentric configuration
Right.
of traits or specific leadership areas or blind spots. I don't know if we have time to do all six, but maybe you would want to highlight for us what you think are the most important ones or what would have the most impact for our listeners.
Yeah, maybe first I'll just try to describe that model that you,
Yeah.
Good.
visually. There's 6 areas to look for blind spots that, when I started to think about my work both as a psychotherapist and as a coach, what really makes up people, and so these 6 areas are and I'll mention them all. These 6 areas are what make up people. But then to John's point earlier, I had to organize it in a way of like, what is hardwired and where's the opportunity for change?
Mhm.
And so if you imagine 3 concentric circles, the bullseye in the middle is your motivation. It's your drive. It's
Mhm.
why you do what you do. And then the next concentric circle around that has 3 areas in there: your traits, which is kind of what we've been talking about, so far, your emotions, and your intellect.
Mm.
And as John said, those 3 are all pretty hardwired, as are your motivations. And then
Mhm.
the outside circle has 2 areas, and this is where you can make change, is in your behavior and in your identity.
Mm.
Um, so if you're an extrovert, and you dominate conversations, 50% of the talk in the meeting is from you, and that's a problem, you can just not talk so much. You
Mm.
can
Right.
train yourself and get all sorts of prompts and ways that you're only talking 20%. Now, you didn't change the fact that you're still an extrovert. You are still an extrovert, but you've changed your behavior. Um,
Yeah.
or in that example that John had about getting promoted, the typical is a subject matter expert, the engineer that gets promoted to be the manager. Well, your identity has been as a engineer, and to know the most about your particular niche area in engineering. And guess what? When you're promoted to manager, now your role is to manage other people. It's not to be the subject matter expert. So that's an identity shift.
Mhm.
Your identity, all the books you're reading, how good you feel about yourself being a really smart engineer. Now you have to start to do something you're probably, not that great at yet, about how to manage people, and change that to be your identity. And so we can do that. We can make changes in our identities. We can make changes in our behavior, even if we keep all that hardwired stuff the same.
Boy, that's a really cool and fresh way to say that. That makes total sense. So if motive is there in the bullseye, is that uh, probably the most important thing for leaders to uncover? Or how do they get in
Yeah.
touch with their motive, their motives?
Yes. Right. So, as a psychotherapist, as a clinical psychologist, this really was probably what I was trying to drive for as much as possible. And the way you get there is through feelings. You
Hmm.
know, you walk out of a meeting and you're frustrated and you're just pissed off. You don't even quite know why. Well, the why is your motives. So
Hmm.
probably something you wanted got blocked, something didn't happen, you got cut off, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of why questions, why are you feeling the way you are? So you can
Hmm.
get to motive typically by looking at emotions. Maybe you're elated and you're having just a great day. And again, why is that?
Hmm.
Some need, some motive's been fulfilled that day, or
Yeah.
it's getting satisfied. And one place to start in terms of looking for blind spots is David McClelland, who was a psychologist at Harvard a long time ago, talked about three motives at work that are pretty universal. Um, the drive for affiliation, the drive for achievement, and the drive for power.
Mm.
And we all probably have set points on those. And to what you said earlier, if you think about when you're under stress, everything starts to get narrowed,
Hmm.
fight or flight, survival. You don't care about anything else. So if you're under stress, you're probably going to over-index on one of those motives that are more core to who you are. If the job's got to get done by Friday and the team's not doing it and you're the manager, you may get into your power motives even much stronger than you normally do because it's getting overstimulated at that point. So
Hmm.
again, self-awareness to know kind of where's my set point on these things and to say, all right, I got to check in where the team's feeling and connect and have that affiliation motive because there's people on my team that probably need that right now. And if all I'm doing is, s- keep my head down over the spreadsheet and telling everybody to leave my office so I can get everything done, because I'm focused on achievement, then I'm not going to be that's going to be a blind spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all have
Oh,
lots of
sorry.
personal motives. So there's a lot of motives, but at least those three are a good place to get started.
Well,
Okay.
that's a great place to get started. But I'm going to back up for 1 second because something you said just jumped out at me. In our world, we help our clients understand what we call the whole person model. We talk about head, heart, and briefcase. You have to look at the whole person when you're looking at
Yep.
optimizing job fit and a place in the organization. But the heart is all about core values, passion, interests. And when I think about motive, it made me think about sort of
Yes.
the heart issues. And you talked about the word feelings. And this is, I mean, let's go back to probably pretty traditional management practices. You really don't talk about your feelings in the workplace.
Right.
And it's a really unhealthy perspective. And quick story, we were working with a family owned business, and Sarah, I love what Sarah does. She puts up at the beginning of a team session, I mean, they were used to this, but puts up on the screen a list of feeling words. And she just
Mm.
said, hey, pick out, where are you right now? Just pick out of all these words, just tell us where you are. And the first time they did it, the founder was like, I got what? I got to talk about my feelings. I mean, the discomfort was so obvious, but it needs to be very, very natural if people are actually going to connect with one another and figure out these difficulties in the workplace. So the feelings
Yeah.
thing, I just had to go back to that.
Well, yeah, it's huge, and I did a lot of work in Silicon Valley with tech companies, and I would get these engineers who would, come in and complain that they had, you know, talked to their team, talked to their boss, laid out this big argument about why they needed to do something or go in a particular direction.
Yeah.
And there would all these feelings would come out. And, and they would just like, why are there feelings in the workplace?
Yeah.
And, this is all so logical.
Yeah.
And I found, I thought, well, I got to talk in their language. So I said, you know what? Feelings are just data.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If you're ignoring an entire data set, how smart is that of you? If you didn't go into that meeting and say, John's not going to like this and Mary's going to have this problem and so-and-so's going to, then you were ignoring all these emotions that you needed to filter in and figure that out the next time you go and make your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your 4th chapter on emotion, you talk about, are your feelings managing you or are you managing your feelings? And I mean, one blind spot that I certainly notice in myself, or it's pointed out to me, or I notice it quite often in others, is that they don't acknowledge that they feel a certain way, but everything about them is communicating that feeling, and it's usually a negative one, like dissatisfaction or disenchantment,
Mm.
upset. I think those things are so readily expressed by the body and the tone of voice and the face, but that lack of awareness about it's almost epidemic, and it's really hard for people to tune into that. Would you agree?
Yeah, and all the research says that what we pay attention to as observers is
Mhm.
the nonverbals.
Yeah.
90% of the message is carried in the nonverbal and only 10% is carried in the verbal. So, and that's all kind of subconscious.
Yeah.
So even if people, to your example, you'd have to ask them, how was Susie in that meeting?
Mm.
And then they would say, oh, well, she was so uncomfortable, even though she was talking about everything being just fine.
Yes.
Because that's what got communicated and that's what they remembered when they left the meeting.
Well, so, Marty, if the argument that this is important data and you don't wanna
Yeah.
overlook data, and who would wanna overlook important data, if that's not enough to sell people on the idea that we really need to develop a relationship and an understanding of our emotions so that we can manage them, is there any other argument? Is there any other selling point we can share?
You know, so in that chapter, I think about emotions, the typical EQ stuff I think about it almost like a pyramid, and that at the foundation is that awareness is what you did, all those feeling words on the, on the
Mhm.
table, on the
Mhm.
chart. You've just got to start to get sophisticated, and there's lots of feelings out there. It isn't just mad, sad, glad.
Mhm.
And the more you can get, it's a skill and you can do it. And if, you can read a novel, it's full of, talking about how the characters felt or watch movies. And so
Yes.
the more sophisticated you get, that's kind of the foundational step. And then the next step is to start to recognize those feelings in
Mhm.
yourself
Yeah.
and then be able to be, you know, comfortable figuring out what to do with them. And I don't mean like clamp them down.
Right?
Sometimes maybe you need to, ratchet them up, but it's getting that ability to kind of manage your feelings. And if you're doing that effectively, then you can start to pay attention to other people's feelings and recognize what they're feeling. And that's all that data. And to me, all of that is geared to the very tip of the pyramid, which is back to what I said earlier about being decisive and strategic.
Mm.
If you've got all that data about yourself and about others, you can, you know, some people might think it's manipulative, but I really just think it's being, you know, present in the moment and doing what's going to get the best outcome.
Mhm.
You can decide that you're going to talk louder because nobody's paying attention to your message and you tend to be
Mhm.
a quiet person. You can pound the table when you never ever do that. And my God, you're going to get a lot of attention at that point and be
Yeah.
very strategic in what you're doing.
So pragmatic and so real. So we talked about these 6 types of leadership blind spots: identity, behavior, traits, intellect, emotion, motive. I wanna just share too that in the book, you have an appendix that even offers some way to potentially assess blind spots. Before I move on though, I do have a question about, like, so what, now what? Like, people who are listening to this, they definitely should read your book. there's also a host of information on your website. We're going to link to your website there. There's other videos and interviews you've done. The model itself is there and it's somewhat interactive on your site, which I think is really cool. But of those six, like, where do we start?
That's it's a basic question and really good
Mhm.
question. And, we are very, I've divided these six things out because they are, your emotions are different than your intellect. Your behavior is different.
Yeah.
You had the heart
Yes.
briefcase. You guys talk about that too.
Mhm.
Um, but we're integrated feedback organisms. So they all feed off of each other and touch each other. So I think start where you where it makes sense to you. I mean,
Mm.
as you said, I've got these ways to identify where you might have blind spots in each of these six areas, and we even have a test, a blind spot assessment that people can take and
Yes.
get that. And so something will speak to you.
Like,
This one I really recognize. That's the place to start. And and then in the last chapter of the book, I do have um, an action plan, in a case study there. And the change is no different. There's nothing magical about that. It's just being, disciplined. It's like going to the gym or getting on a
mhm.
diet or making any kind of change. You've got to kind of figure out what's the old behavior that you don't want to do anymore and what's the new behavior that you want to do instead. I
Yes.
want to talk less in the meeting. I want to ask more questions. And then what are the prompts for you to be able to remind yourself, oh, I got to catch myself now and do the new behavior instead of the old behavior. And then you just keep practicing it and getting better and getting feedback about it and so on. But you just and this, and back to the point about it's just small changes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have this experience. I work with leaders that I don't want to add one more thing to their inbox. I mean, they've got so much that they have to do. And so my message is, well, this should take up 5 to 10% of the space in your brain. And every Friday, maybe you can review this for 20 minutes about how you did on this new behavior change that we're working on.
Mhm.
And it'll be, and put a little sticky note on something to remind you. But it's not something that you really need to be, focusing on all the time.
I don't need atomic habits to be able to deploy it. I was just thinking about, there's methodology there. So it's awareness, insight, and then small action that you
Right.
can measure, not piling on, loading on millions of different efforts and changes, but just these. I love that there's so much pragmatic advice. And I think you even in the book highlight some coaching examples, like you're actually
Yes.
coaching people.
Yeah. The book is story driven.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Yeah.
powerful.
So every chapter's got a whole bunch of stories.
One of our favorite phrases here at Real Good Ventures is that feedback is the oxygen to engagement. And it shouldn't take courage for a manager or a supervisor to go to any one of his or her direct reports and just simply say, listen, what are the things that I'm doing that are helping you the most? And what are the things that I'm doing that are hindering you? Now, that requires a level of trust and psychological safety,
Yeah.
hoping you're going to get some really authentic and good feedback. But whenever we've done or I've done some leadership coaching, I run into people that I say, okay, this is what I want you to do with this individual or these individuals. Here's a good approach to have just an informal conversation to glean that feedback. And they will just wait. And it's like, oh, I haven't done that yet and I need to do it. And it's like, what are you afraid of? Because it's like a gift. And
Yeah.
whatever you hear, you need to, I think, own your emotions and own your feelings about how you're receiving it. And you don't want to look like you're infuriated with the individual. But that changes things at that small level that have huge impact. And we've been on this message ever since we started this. This is what we talk about is don't be afraid of that because it will I'm sorry, I'm not going to use that word. It will alter, it will improve the way you develop the people around you.
Yeah, I've certainly had that same experience,
Yeah.
and I think about it. Sports is such a good metaphor often in business, and because it's driving towards toward winning, whatever winning might be.
Hmm.
And my God, talk about people that are getting feedback all the time, right?
Oh yeah.
How much is every one of your people you're talking about Monday morning quarterbacked,
Yeah.
the game on the weekend, and those players. get feedback all the time, right? I mean, they're just, they're coaches, everybody, everything they do is examined, and they're getting feedback. And anybody that's been coached throughout their life realizes that that is the way you get better.
Mhm.
And there's no judgment about it. It's all performance oriented. We all want to be better. I mean, the one with blind spots, one question I often get is, if it's a blind spot, how can I know what my blind spot is? It's kind of that catch-22.
Right.
And, the answer is what you just talked about. It's feedback from other people that begins to shine the light about what you may, be not paying attention to that you really need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I was playing pickleball the other day, and
That's a
I
big thing in our firm now, by the way, just so you know.
yeah, we
Yeah.
love to play. I partnered up with a gal, and I play with her. I played with her a lot, but she's always telling me what to do.
Mm,
And it occurred to me that, I mean, I'm like, I know what I need to be doing. I don't need you to tell. Was thinking this. I didn't say it out loud. I'm sure my energy reflected that, but I appreciated that other people have done the same thing, but I received that feedback very differently from those other people. And there was no like, oh my gosh, you don't even know what you're talking about. There was no
right.
defensiveness. And I just had to get in touch with the fact that something in her, is something I was unwilling to look at in myself. So I appreciate the practical nature of my blind spots and just knowing, well, when I see it, it's sort of like if you spot it, you got it kind of thing.
Right.
That when there's a disturbance or a defensiveness or an automatic posture that says, you don't know what you're talking about, that's likely the time I need to pay attention the most.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm laughing a little bit. Side note, you
Yeah.
should have had her call me, Sarah, because I could have advised her. Telling Sarah Best what to do is not a good strategy. So, sorry,
Well,
I'm
Marty, go
working on
ahead.
that.
I
I'm
was
working on that.
I was just going to go there that,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you guys work on their ways to give feedback
Oh,
that
yeah.
people are going to be able to receive it better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, part of it may have been on you to pay attention, but clearly she also was not giving feedback in a way that she was trying to give it in a way that you could accept it.
This is true. Yep.
Yeah.
She never even asked me if it was okay
Yeah,
to coach
exactly.
me.
Doesn't
Does
that
she listen to
that
the
what makes
program?
sense?
Because I might have to cut this out, Sarah. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I don't know. I don't think so. I better find out. Uh, I don't want her to feel uncomfortable. One last question though, and I think one of the sharp observations, there's so many in your book that you make, Marty, is about that self-awareness is truly not natural. And maybe I should have asked this question in the beginning, but why are we not reliable narrators of our, you know, story, our own selves?
I don't know if I know the why answer, to that, but it is a truth. I mean, there's a whole bunch of research from these guys called Dunning and Kruger. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where
Oh.
we tend to overestimate our own abilities. Men are even more akin to that in the business world than women probably.
Hmm.
But that we do that a lot. I don't know if it's around supporting self-esteem or other kinds of things, but I think that's a place to start is, that we probably do overestimate our own abilities. And, so there's opportunities for feedback around that.
I knew a leader of an organization who would always tell his team, "You need to self-evaluate. You need to do some self-evaluation." And it's not possible. It's like Dunning and Kruger being in a hall of mirrors. It doesn't work. You need that external tools or people to really make that happen.
And you talked about this earlier, John. Feedback works to me when it's a culture of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And, I get a lot of people saying after I give a talk or something, they'll come up, I want to tell this one person that I work with about their blind spots. And how can I do that in the most effective way? And my question is, have you shared your blind spots first? And that's where it starts. And then that's where it starts is
Yeah.
with the leader. If the leader can say, and not even start to say, I'm going to do it with everybody else. If they can create that environment of, like you said earlier, I want to get better. And so I want to create a climate where you guys can give me some feedback. And then I'm going to tell you what I want to work on. And then I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable and help me get better at what I want to get better at. And then you can create that kind of climate within a company for everybody to be able to do it. But really, the leader needs to go first because of the power differential, for that to happen.
This is such a good body of work. It's not that people need more tools. I think what we can take away is that we need fewer illusions about ourselves, and that awareness is so key.
Yeah.
And you've given us some very practical ways just to enter into that exploration and to uncover some of that. The one about take your strengths and put TOO in front of them. And then, if you want to test that out, ask a few people, can I be too much this? This is so good. Yeah, I'm really excited for your work to be out there. And we always like to ask too, what's next for you, Marty?
So I'm at the point in my career where I'm having fun writing and speaking. And I partnered with a company called Behavioral Essentials, and that's what you'll see on a lot of things on the blindspotting.com website. So it's been fun for me to see other people take what I've created and do more with it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good on individuals. I'm not that great on teams and cultures. Obviously, teams have blind spots and companies have blind spots. And so I think there's opportunity for this to kind of other people to take parts of this and take it places. And I'm just excited to see where all that goes.
There is a segment in the book about the team part, which is powerful. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast. We'd love to reconnect at some point in the future,
Sure.
and just to see and hear how this plays out and what it makes possible.
Thank you. I'd look forward to that.
Yeah.
Marty, great having you here. You are now officially part of the Boss Hole Transformation Nation.
Thank you.
And we'll get you a t-shirt. All right, everybody. That's actually true. All right, everybody. Great having you here. And we will see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles. Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.